You're standing in front of a plant you've never seen before. Bright red berries, glossy, almost inviting, clustered thick on a low branch at the edge of a clearing. Your stomach is empty, has been empty for most of the day, and your body is screaming at you to eat something, anything. But you have no label, no internet search, no guidebook tucked into your pocket, no way to know if this berry is dinner or the last thing you'll ever eat. One wrong choice, and depending on the plant, you're dead within hours, sometimes without warning symptoms fast enough to reverse course. This wasn't a rare moment for your ancestors. This was every single day, for every single person, for hundreds of thousands of years. So how did ancient humans figure out what was safe to eat in a world with no instructions, no labels, and no second chances?
Let's start with the most basic tool they had, one built directly into the body: their senses. Bitterness, in particular, functioned as a kind of built-in warning system. Many toxic plants produce bitter-tasting compounds as a natural chemical defense against being eaten by animals, a strategy plants developed over millions of years of their own evolutionary arms race. And humans, like most animals that eat plants, evolved a strong innate aversion to bitter tastes for exactly this reason. A food that tasted intensely bitter was usually a food to spit out immediately, no matter how hungry a person was, because that bitterness was often the plant's own chemical signature for "this will hurt you." But taste alone was never enough, and ancient humans seemed to understand this instinctively. Some of the deadliest plants on Earth taste completely normal, even pleasant, sweet in some cases. Relying purely on taste would have gotten entire groups killed. So the second major tool was observation, specifically watching what other animals in the environment ate and how they reacted. If birds were regularly eating a particular berry and appeared to be thriving on it, that was genuinely useful information, worth remembering and passing on. If a herd of grazing animals consistently avoided a specific plant, walking right past it even during lean seasons when food was scarce, that mattered just as much. Ancient humans weren't guessing blind in an empty landscape. They were constantly reading the behavior of every other creature around them, treating the natural world as a kind of shared, ongoing survival manual, written in behavior rather than words. Then there was trial, but never blind trial, never reckless trial. Anthropologists studying surviving hunter-gatherer societies around the world have documented a remarkably consistent approach to unfamiliar foods, sometimes called sequential sampling. Instead of eating a full portion of something new, a person would touch a small piece to their lips first and wait. If nothing happened, a tiny taste might follow, and then more waiting, sometimes for hours, sometimes overnight. Only after a period with no negative reaction would a slightly larger amount be attempted, and even then, cautiously. This wasn't caution for its own sake, and it wasn't slow because people didn't understand urgency. It was often the only real line of defense standing between a promising new food source and a fatal mistake. And it meant a single person might spend an entire day, sometimes longer, carefully testing one unfamiliar plant before anyone else in the group touched it at all.
And when someone did get it wrong, and inevitably, across enough generations, someone always did, that mistake didn't disappear. It became permanent group knowledge, carried forward with a weight that pure information without cost never carries. A person who became violently ill or died after eating a specific plant became a lesson, repeated and reinforced until it turned into something closer to a rule than a memory. This is very likely part of why so many cultures around the world developed such specific, oddly detailed food taboos and preparation rules, restrictions that can look arbitrary or even superstitious from the outside today, but were frequently built directly on top of someone's real, fatal trial, centuries or millennia earlier. The taboo outlived the tragedy that created it, stripped of its original story, but keeping its protective function intact.
Children absorbed this accumulated knowledge long before they could speak in full sentences, simply by watching. They watched which plants their parents walked past without a second glance. They watched which ones were only ever eaten after being cooked over a fire, or soaked in water for an entire day, or pounded and left to sit before anyone touched them. Some plants that are perfectly edible today, and even nutritionally valuable, only became part of the human diet because someone, at some point in the deep past, discovered that heat, or water, or time, or some combination of the three, could neutralize a toxin that raw exposure simply couldn't survive. Cassava is a modern example still relevant today. Eaten raw and improperly prepared, it can be lethal. But processed correctly, through soaking, fermenting, and cooking, it becomes a safe and reliable staple food for millions of people. That knowledge, refined over an unknown number of trials and errors, had to be discovered once by someone, somewhere, and then carried forward with enough precision that it never needed to be rediscovered at fatal cost again. There's also a layer of seasonal and regional knowledge that doesn't get discussed often enough. A plant safe to eat in one stage of its growth could be toxic in another. Certain roots were safe only if harvested at a specific time of year, before or after a particular kind of frost, before flowering, after the first rains. This required not just knowledge of individual plants, but a working mental calendar passed down across generations, matching food sources to specific windows of time, specific locations, specific weather patterns. Get the timing wrong, and a plant that was food last month could be poison this month. None of this was written down. All of it lived in memory, reinforced through repetition, storytelling, and direct demonstration, generation after generation. This entire system, taste-based instinct, observation of other animals, careful sequential testing, inherited taboos built on remembered tragedy, and precise seasonal timing, worked together as a single layered defense against an environment that offered no guarantees and no instructions. It wasn't perfect. People still died from bad choices, from unfamiliar environments during migrations, from years when usual food sources failed and desperation forced risks that wouldn't normally have been taken. But as a system, refined continuously over hundreds of thousands of years, it worked well enough that enough people survived long enough to keep passing all of it forward. None of this knowledge came from a book, a label, or a warning sign. It came from generations of people testing the world carefully, patiently, and sometimes at enormous personal cost, then passing forward exactly what they learned to the next generation, who tested it further, refined it, and passed it forward again. Every single meal you've ever eaten without a second thought, every ingredient you've never had to question, exists because someone, thousands of years ago, took the risk first so that you never would have to.